The lonely cowboy waited for his bride, but when the stagecoach door opened, a black nun stepped down with 10 starving children instead. Dust swirled around Ezekiel Thornfield's boots as he stood frozen at his ranch gate. His Sunday coat hung stiff against his shoulders. The letter from Margaret Wells crumpled in his sweating palm. Sister Magdalene Washington adjusted her habit and surveyed the barren landscape. Behind her, children tumbled from the coach like autumn leaves. Their clothes hung in tatters. Their eyes held the hollow look of the perpetually hungry. "You, Mr. Thornfield?" The driver, Curtis Briggs, spat tobacco juice into the dirt. Zeke nodded. His voice caught somewhere between his chest and throat. "Where's Margaret?" The words came out cracked. Curtis scratched his graying beard. "About that." Sister Magdalene stepped forward. Her presence commanded attention, despite her small frame. "Sir, I apologize for the confusion. These children need help." A girl no older than 8 swayed on her feet. Ruby. Her name would come later, but even now Zeke could see she was fading like morning mist. "The lady you was expecting." Curtis shifted his weight. "She made it to Bitter Creek 3 days back." Zeke's heart hammered against his ribs. 3 days? "Took one look at your place from town. Decided Banker Wellington suited her better." Curtis shrugged. "Married him yesterday." The words hit like winter wind. Zeke had spent his savings on the wedding dress hanging in his bedroom. Had practiced his vows in the mirror each morning for 2 months. Sister Magdalene watched his face crumble. She had seen men break before. This one did it quietly. "We don't mean to impose," she said, "but we're desperate." The children clustered behind her black robes. Samuel, 12 and suspicious, kept his hand near his coat pocket. Thomas, 10 and gentle-eyed, held little Maria's hand. 6 other faces peered out, each carrying stories Zeke couldn't yet imagine. The orphanage in Denver burned. Sister Magdalene's voice remained steady. "We're bound for St. Catherine's Sanctuary in California." Ruby's knees buckled. She hit the ground like a dropped stone. Sister Magdalene knelt beside her instantly. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, checking pulse, temperature, breathing. The other children pressed closer, their fear palpable as summer heat. "She needs food and rest." Sister Magdalene looked up at Zeke. "They all do." Zeke stared at the collapsed child. Her face was pale as bleached bone. Her breathing came shallow and quick. "How long since they ate?" 2 days, maybe 3. Curtis climbed back onto his perch. "Storm's coming in fast. I need to make town before it hits." Dark clouds gathered on the horizon. The wind carried the sharp scent of snow. "You can't leave them here," Zeke said. "Can't take them neither. Coach is busted, and I got 1 horse. Gone lame." Curtis gathered his reins. "Besides, nearest town's 20 miles. They'd never make it." The first snowflakes drifted down like ash. Ruby's eyes fluttered closed. Zeke looked at his empty house. At the wedding dress waiting in vain. At 10 children who might die if he turned them away. His throat felt full of dust. One night. "Sister." Magdalene's shoulders sagged with relief. "Bless you. Just tonight, till the storm passes." Curtis snapped his reins. The coach rolled away, leaving wheel ruts in the gathering snow. Zeke stood in his dooryard surrounded by strangers. The life he had planned crumbled like old paper. Margaret was gone. His future was gone. In their place stood a woman who had sworn herself to God and 10 children who belonged to no one. The wind picked up. Snow began falling in earnest. "Can you carry her?" Sister Magdalene asked, gesturing to Ruby. Zeke lifted the girl. She weighed nothing. Her head lolled against his shoulder. "The others can walk," Sister Magdalene said. "Samuel, help Maria. Thomas, stay with the little ones." They moved toward the house like refugees from some distant war. Snow swirled around them, erasing their footprints as they walked. Inside, the house felt different. Zeke had lived alone for 5 years. The silence had been his companion. Now children's voices filled the corners. Their presence changed the very air. Sister Magdalene laid Ruby on Zeke's bed. She pressed her ear to the girl's chest, counting heartbeats. "Soup," she said without looking up. "Something warm and easy to digest." Zeke stood useless in his own kitchen. He could brand cattle and mend fences. He could read weather in cloud formations. But he had never nursed a starving child. Sister Magdalene rose and moved past him to the stove. Her hands found ingredients he had forgotten he owned. Salt pork, dried beans, a precious onion from his root cellar. "You know cooking?" he asked. "I know survival." The other children huddled. Near the fireplace, Samuel's eyes never left Zeke's face. Trust would not come easy to this one. Outside, the storm intensified. Wind rattled the windows. Snow piled against the door. Sister Magdalene stirred the pot. Steam rose like incense. The smell made Zeke's stomach growl, though he had eaten that morning. "When did you last feed them properly?" he asked. "The orphanage served meals." Her voice carried weight. "Before it burned." Ruby stirred on the bed. Her eyes opened, unfocused but aware. "Where?" she whispered. "Safe," Sister Magdalene said. "You're safe." The word hung in the air like a promise none of them believed. Snow continued falling. The storm showed no signs of stopping. One night was becoming something longer. Zeke watched Sister Magdalene tend the children with quiet efficiency. She moved like she belonged here, like she had always belonged here. The realization unsettled him more than the storm outside. The storm held them captive for 3 days. Snow piled against the windows until the house felt buried alive. Wind howled through gaps in the walls that Zeke had never noticed. The children huddled together like wolves in winter, sharing warmth and whispered fears. Sister Magdalene transformed chaos into order with the precision of a field general. She assigned sleeping spaces, rationed food, organized the children into work details. Ruby helped fold blankets. Thomas carried water. Even little Maria found purpose sweeping dust from corners. Zeke watched from the edges of his own life. His bachelor habits crumbled under the weight of 10 additional souls. Coffee disappeared by noon. Firewood burned twice as fast. The outhouse saw more traffic than a cattle town on market day. But something else changed too. The house breathed differently. Laughter echoed from corners that had known only silence. Children's drawings appeared on his table, crude sketches of horses and houses and families holding hands. The smell of Sister Magdalene's cooking replaced the stale air of solitude. On the second morning, Zeke found Ruby drawing by the window. Her pencil stub moved across brown paper with careful precision. "What's that?" he asked. She held up the picture. A house, a man, a woman in black robes. Children scattered across the page like seeds. "Home," she said. The word hit him sideways. Thomas proved himself with the animals. The boy moved among the cattle with natural grace, reading their moods, anticipating their needs. He had gentle hands and patient eyes. "You worked livestock." "Before?" Zeke asked. Thomas nodded. "My pa had a farm. Before." The word "before" carried weight. Zeke didn't press for details. Samuel remained a fortress of suspicion. He sat with his back to walls, watched every movement, kept his hand near his coat pocket. When the younger children cried, he comforted them. When strangers might threaten, he stood guard. "What you hiding in that pocket?" Zeke asked one evening. Samuel's eyes hardened. "Protection." Sister Magdalene looked up from her mending. A silent communication passed between them. She nodded once. Samuel relaxed. Trust would come slowly here. Maria spoke in whispers, when she spoke at all. She followed Zeke through his daily chores, staying just beyond arm's reach. Her eyes tracked his every movement like a frightened animal learning to recognize safety. The other children fell somewhere between Samuel's suspicion and Ruby's hope. Each carried invisible scars. Each tested the boundaries of this temporary refuge. Sister Magdalene proved most surprising of all. She knew cattle. Not just the basics any farm woman might learn, but the subtle signs of disease, the seasonal patterns of grazing, the techniques for moving herds across difficult terrain. She spoke of breeding stock and market prices with the fluency of experience. On the storm's second night, Zeke's remaining cattle began dying. The cold was brutal, but cattle were built for cold. Something else was killing them. He found 3 dead in the morning, their bodies already stiff as boards. Disease? Sister Magdalene asked, studying the carcasses. Maybe, or poison. Zeke kicked at the frozen ground. Lost 6 head already this winter. Can't afford to lose more. Sister Magdalene knelt beside one of the dead animals. Her hands traced its neck, its jaw, its swollen tongue. Larkspur, she said. See the foam around the mouth? The way the legs are drawn up? Zeke stared at her. How do you know that? She stood, brushing snow from her habit. We need to move the living ones. Keep them away from the southeast pasture. Sister, how do you know about larkspur poisoning? Her hands stilled. The question hung between them like smoke from a dying fire. I've seen it before, she said finally. But that wasn't the whole truth. Zeke could hear the silence underneath her words. They moved the cattle through knee-deep snow, Sister Magdalene working beside him with the skill of a seasoned ranch hand. She anticipated the animals' movements, positioned herself at the right moments, whistled commands that turned the herd with minimal effort. The children watched from the window as their temporary guardians fought to save what remained of Zeke's livelihood. You're not just a nun, Zeke said as they herded the last steer to safety. Sister Magdalene adjusted her habit. Snow clung to her black robes like scattered prayers. We're all more than one thing, she said. That night, the children fell asleep to the sound of wind and their own whispered conversations. Zeke caught fragments. Worry about the future, fear of separation. Hope that maybe, just maybe, this strange arrangement might last. Samuel's voice carried furthest. Remember what happened to the others, he told the younger ones. Remember what nice men do when nobody's watching. The words chilled Zeke more than the storm outside. Ruby drew by firelight, her pencil stub wearing down to nothing. Her pictures grew more detailed each day. The house in her drawings had more windows now, more rooms, more space for the family that lived inside. On the 3rd night, the roof began to leak. Ice dams forced water through shingles Zeke had meant to replace before winter. Drips became streams, became a steady flow that soaked through the ceiling above the main room. Everyone up, Sister Magdalene commanded as chunks of plaster began falling. They moved furniture, spread blankets, positioned pots and pans to catch the worst of it. The children worked without complaint, accustomed to disasters that required quick thinking and quicker hands. A section of ceiling sagged ominously. It's coming down, Zeke said. Sister Magdalene herded the children toward the kitchen. Stay back. The ceiling collapsed with a wet, splintering crash. Debris scattered across the floor. Snow poured through the gap, followed by the merciless wind. We need to patch it, Sister Magdalene said. Zeke stared at the damage. In this weather? Unless you want to freeze to death. They worked together, passing boards and nails, fighting wind and snow and their own exhaustion. Sister Magdalene held planks in place while Zeke hammered. Her strength surprised him. Her endurance impressed him. The children helped where they could, forming a human chain to pass supplies, holding lanterns to provide light, singing soft songs to keep spirits up. Maria spoke her first full sentence as they worked. Thank you for keeping us safe. The words were barely audible above the storm, but they reached Zeke's ears with perfect clarity. When the patch held and the wind finally died, they sat around the fire drying their clothes and warming their hands. The children fell asleep one by one, exhausted by the night's adventure. Zeke and Sister Magdalene remained awake, tending the fire, listening to the storm's gradual retreat. "You saved my cattle," he said. "You saved us first. I didn't do anything special." Sister Magdalene looked at the sleeping children, their faces peaceful in the firelight. "You let us stay," she said. "That's everything." Outside, the wind finally stopped howling. The storm was breaking. Soon they would have to face the world beyond these walls. But for now, in the warm circle of firelight, they were home. Morning brought stillness after the storm. Snow covered the landscape in pristine white, erasing boundaries between earth and sky. The silence felt profound after 3 days of howling wind. Zeke stood at his patched window, watching sunlight fracture across the drifts. The children stirred slowly, unused to quiet mornings. Ruby resumed her drawing, adding details to her family portrait. Thomas ventured outside to check the animals. Maria shadowed Zeke's movements with increasing confidence. Sister Magdalene moved through the house with practiced efficiency, but something had changed. She lingered over simple tasks. Her eyes swept across rooms that would soon be empty again. Her hands smoothed surfaces with unnecessary care. "Roads will be clear by afternoon," Zeke said. Sister Magdalene folded the same towel twice. Yes, neither mentioned leaving. Repairs demanded attention. The roof patch needed reinforcement. Fallen beams required clearing. Ice dams threatened other sections of the house. Sister Magdalene worked alongside Zeke without being asked. She anticipated his needs, handed him tools before he requested them, braced boards with sure hands. Her competence unnerved him. "Where did you learn construction?" he asked, here and there. "That's not an answer." Sister Magdalene hammered a nail with precise strikes. "Some knowledge comes from necessity." But Zeke watched her hands position the lumber with practiced ease. She understood load-bearing walls, knew which joints needed reinforcement, spotted structural weaknesses with the eye of experience. This was not knowledge gained from necessity. This was expertise earned through years of practice. "You built houses before taking vows," he said. Sister Magdalene's hammer stilled mid-swing. "Everyone has a past," she said finally. The evasion confirmed his suspicions. Thomas proved invaluable with the livestock. The boy moved among the cattle with instinctive understanding, checking for injury, distributing hay, cleaning water troughs. His small hands worked with surprising strength. Zeke found him repairing a broken fence rail with skillful precision. "Your father taught you well," Zeke said. Thomas's face clouded. "Pa knew everything about animals. Said they could sense a person's heart. What happened to him?" "Fever took him first, then Ma, then the farm." Thomas's voice carried no self-pity, just acceptance of hard truths. "Banks sold everything, sent me to the orphanage." Stories like Thomas's had become common across the frontier. Drought, disease, and debt destroyed families with ruthless efficiency. The lucky ones found new homes. The unlucky ones disappeared into institutions or worse. Ruby appeared at Zeke's elbow, holding her latest drawing. The house had grown again. In her imagination, wings extended from both sides. Gardens bloomed around the foundation. Horses grazed in expanded pastures. "Is this how you see the ranch?" Zeke asked. Ruby nodded solemnly. "How it could be." The picture showed a dozen people scattered across the property. Adults working, children playing. Everyone belonging to the same impossible family. Samuel maintained his vigilant distance, but cracks appeared in his armor. When little Maria stumbled in the snow, he caught her without thinking. When the younger children fought over the last biscuit, he gave them his portion. When fears surfaced in whispered conversations, he offered comfort, but his hand never strayed far from his coat pocket. "What you protecting them from?" Zeke asked during evening chores. Samuel's eyes hardened into flint. "Men who pretend to care." "Not all men pretend. Enough do." The conversation ended there. But Samuel's meaning hung in the air like smoke. Trust had been broken before. Kindness had led to betrayal. Safety had proved temporary. Sister Magdalene prepared supper with ingredients she somehow stretched into abundance. The children gathered around Zeke's table, their faces bright in the lamplight. For a moment, the scene resembled Ruby's drawings. After the meal, as dishes were cleared and bedtime approached, Zeke found Sister Magdalene standing at his father's old workbench. Her fingers traced the worn tools with familiar recognition. "You know these," he said. Sister Magdalene picked up a draw knife, tested its edge, set it down with careful precision. "Your father was Jacob Thornfield," she said quietly. Zeke's breath caught. "You knew him?" "I worked the Morrison Ranch. Next valley over." Her voice carried the weight of old pain. "Jacob was respected. Fair dealer. Good neighbor. That was 10 years ago. 11. The specific time frame revealed more than she intended. Sister Magdalene had not simply worked in the area. She had lived here, had roots here, had left for reasons she was not ready to share. "Why did you leave?" Zeke asked. Sister Magdalene's hands stilled on the workbench. "There was a fire," she said finally. "The Henderson place. I tried to help, tried to save them." Her voice broke slightly on the word tried. "I failed," she continued. "Lost the whole family, mother, father, 3 children." The confession explained everything. The guilt that drove her to religious life, the dedication to saving orphans, the expertise born from trying to prevent disasters she had lived through before. "So you became a nun," Zeke said. "Seemed like penance. Service to God, redemption for my failures. And now?" Sister Magdalene looked around the room, filled with sleeping children. Her fingers touched her habit's rough fabric. "Now I wonder if redemption looks different than I thought." Outside, wind began rising again. Not the brutal howl of the recent storm, but the steady push of weather systems moving across the plains. Change was coming. Samuel appeared in the doorway, fully dressed despite the late hour. "We need to talk," he said. The 3 adults gathered near the dying fire. Samuel's young face carried the weight of terrible knowledge. "You think we're safe here," he said. "But safe don't last." "What do you mean?" Zeke asked. Samuel glanced at Sister Magdalene. She nodded encouragement. "The last place we stayed," Samuel began, "man seemed nice. Fed us, gave us beds, promised to help." His voice dropped to a whisper. "Sold half of us to work camps. Kept the strong ones, sent the weak ones away, said it was for our own good." The words hit the room with the force of a physical blow. "That's why you carry the knife," Zeke said. Samuel nodded. "Won't let it happen again." Sister Magdalene's face had gone pale. "How did you escape?" "Fire," Samuel said simply. "Barn caught flame. In the confusion, we ran. Found each other later. Been running since." "And the sheriff in Bitter Creek?" Zeke asked. "Heard stories. Clayton Morse. Takes orphans. They disappear." Samuel's hand moved to his pocket. "He'll come for us eventually. They always do." The revelation transformed everything. This was not simply about charity or temporary shelter. These children were fugitives. Sister Magdalene was protecting them from a system designed to exploit their vulnerability. "How long before someone comes looking?" Zeke asked. "Soon," Sister Magdalene said. "We've stayed too long already." But even as she spoke, none of them moved toward preparation for departure. The house held them with invisible chains forged from hope and belonging. Ruby's drawing lay on the table, her imagined family visible in the lamplight. Outside, the wind carried the promise of approaching riders. The riders appeared at noon, dark shapes against the white landscape. Zeke counted 5 men on horseback approaching his gate. Their leader wore a star on his chest that caught sunlight with cold authority. Sheriff Clayton Morse had arrived to collect what he considered his property. Sister Magdalene gathered the children with swift efficiency. No words were needed. They had practiced this dance of evasion too many times. Samuel's hand found his pocket. Ruby clutched her drawings. The younger ones pressed close to Thomas, seeking protection in numbers. "Stay inside," Zeke commanded. "All of you." He stepped onto his porch as the riders reined up in his yard. Morse dismounted with deliberate slowness, his boots hitting the ground with the finality of a judge's gavel. "Thornfield," Morse said. His voice carried the weight of assumed authority. "Sheriff." Behind Morse rode Reverend Whitmore, a thin man with pale eyes and nervous hands. 3 townspeople completed the group, their faces set with righteous determination. Zeke recognized them all. Men who had never spoken to him before this moment, but now felt entitled to judge his choices. "Heard you got some strays," Morse said. "Got cattle, if that's what you mean." "You know what I mean." Morse's eyes swept the property, cataloging. Details: fresh footprints in the snow. Smoke from a chimney that should only serve 1 man. The subtle signs of a house sheltering more souls than it was meant to hold. "Word is you're harboring runaway orphans," Morse continued. "That's a serious matter. Don't know what you heard." "I heard plenty." Morse stepped closer. "Got responsibilities to these children, legal obligations." Sister Magdalene appeared in the doorway, her black robe stark against the white painted frame. She carried herself with quiet dignity, but Zeke could see the tension in her shoulders. "Sister," Reverend Whitmore said, "we've come to escort you and the children to proper accommodations." "We have proper accommodations," Sister Magdalene replied. "A bachelor ranch is no place for children," one of the townspeople interjected. "Especially not with someone of your persuasion caring for them." The words hung in the cold air. Their meaning was clear without being spoken directly. Morse smiled without warmth. "Community has standards." "Expectations." "Expectations about what?" Zeke asked. "About maintaining order. About knowing one's place." Morse's hand rested casually on his gun belt. "About not causing trouble for decent folks." Ruby appeared at Sister Magdalene's side, her small face pressed against the nun's robes. The sight of the child seemed to intensify Morse's focus. "That one there," Morse said, pointing at Ruby. "She's been reported missing from state custody. Serious crime, harboring fugitives. She's under my legal guardianship." Sister Magdalene sighed. "Papers can be revoked." Morse's smile grew colder. "Especially when circumstances warrant." A second horse approached from the direction of town. Margaret Wells rode side saddle, her fine dress incongruous against the harsh landscape. Behind her came a man in expensive coat, his soft hands and pale skin marking him as Banker Wellington. Zeke's humiliation was now complete. His rejected bride had come to witness his downfall. "Hello, Ezekiel," Margaret said. Her voice carried no warmth. Wellington dismounted and surveyed the scene with calculating eyes. "Thornfield, we need to discuss your financial obligations." "What obligations?" "Your mortgage payments are 3 months behind. The bank has been patient, but recent developments require reassessment." Zeke's chest tightened. "I'm current on payments." "Were," Wellington corrected. "Before you decided to run a charity operation instead of a working ranch." The trap closed around them with mechanical precision. Morse provided legal pressure. Wellington wielded financial leverage. The community offered moral justification. Together, they formed an alliance designed to crush resistance. "Simple solution," Morse said. "Turn over the children. Resume normal operations. Bank forgives the irregularities." "And if I refuse?" Wellington adjusted his coat. Foreclosure proceedings begin immediately. You'll lose everything. Sister Magdalene stepped forward. This is my fault. I'll take the children and leave. Where? Morse asked. You got no money, no transport, no destination that'll take you. The sheriff's confidence revealed uncomfortable truths. He had planned this confrontation carefully. Every escape route was blocked. Every alternative was eliminated. Thomas appeared beside Sister Magdalene, his young face set with determination. Then Samuel, his hand visibly gripping something in his pocket. The other children followed, forming a defensive line. Behind their protectors. We're not going, Ruby said. Her voice was small but clear. Morse laughed. Child, you don't get a choice. Neither do you, Zeke said. The words surprised everyone, including Zeke himself. But once spoken, they felt true. Excuse me? Morse said. You heard me. These children are staying. Wellington stepped forward. Thornfield, you're making a costly mistake. Maybe, but it's my mistake to make. Margaret spoke for the first time since her greeting. Ezekiel, be sensible. You can't care for all these children. Seems to me I've been doing exactly that. For a few days, she said. What about months, years? What about when people stop trading with you, stop hiring you, stop treating you as one of them? Her words carried the weight of social reality. The community could isolate him completely, drive him into poverty, make survival impossible. Then I'll find new people, Zeke said. Morse's patience evaporated. Enough talking. Children, gather your things. You're coming with us. Samuel stepped forward, his hand emerging from his pocket. The knife gleamed in the winter sunlight. Not threatening, but present. A statement of intent. No, he said simply. The adults tensed. Morse's hand moved toward his gun. Put that away, boy, Morse commanded. Put yours away first, Samuel replied. Sister Magdalene placed her hand on Samuel's shoulder. There's been enough violence in your life, and there'll be more if we go with them. Ruby broke away from the group and ran to Zeke, her small arms wrapped around his waist with desperate strength. Don't let them take us, she whispered. Please don't let them take us. Zeke looked down at the child clinging to him with absolute trust. At Sister Magdalene, whose faith had brought them all to this moment. At the other children, who had finally found something worth defending. At Morse, whose smile promised terrible consequences for defiance. At Wellington, whose financial power could destroy everything Zeke had built. At Margaret, whose presence reminded him of all the conventional happiness he was choosing to abandon. The wind picked up, scattering snow across the yard. Ruby's drawings fluttered from her pocket, images of family spreading across the ground beneath the horses' hooves. Well? Morse demanded. What's it going to be? Zeke felt the weight of every choice that had led to this moment. The loneliness that had driven him to seek a mail-order bride. The desperation that had made him open his door to strangers. The growing love that now bound him to these unwanted children. Ruby looked up at him with eyes that held the entirety of hope. The answer came without hesitation. They stay, Zeke said. The words fell into the winter air with the finality of stones dropped in still water. Morse's hand tightened on his gun belt. Wellington's face flushed with indignation. Margaret shook her head in disbelief. You're making a grave mistake. Morse said, my land, my choice. Not for long, Wellington interjected. Foreclosure papers will be filed tomorrow. Ruby's grip tightened around Zeke's waist. Her small body trembled against his coat, but she held fast. The other children pressed closer together, drawing strength from their makeshift family's first stand. Morse stepped forward. Boy, put that knife away before someone gets hurt. Samuel held his ground. People are already hurt. We're not going to let it happen again. Sister Magdalene moved to Samuel's side. Her presence created a barrier between the children and the men who would separate them. Sheriff, she said quietly. "These children have suffered enough." "They'll suffer more in the wrong hands," Morse replied. "Community knows what's best." Reverend Whitmore had remained silent, but now he urged his horse closer. His pale eyes swept across the scene with uncomfortable intensity. "Perhaps we should discuss this matter more carefully," he said. "Nothing to discuss," Morse snapped. "Law is law." "Indeed," Whitmore murmured. "The law is quite specific about proper procedures." Something in the Reverend's tone made Morse pause. A subtle tension passed between the two men, unspoken communication that the others couldn't decipher. Ruby suddenly broke away from Zeke and ran toward the old cabin. Her small form disappeared into the swirling snow before anyone could react. "Ruby!" Sister Magdalene called. The child's flight shattered the standoff. Morse cursed and spurred his horse after her. The other riders followed, leaving deep tracks in the pristine snow. Zeke and Sister Magdalene ran through the drifts, their breath coming in sharp puffs. The children followed, Samuel still gripping his knife, Thomas helping little Maria through the deep snow. They found Ruby in Zeke's father's abandoned cabin, huddled in the corner beside a makeshift shrine. Her drawings covered the rough walls, each one depicting their impossible family. Houses with many rooms, gardens bursting with life, children and adults working together in perfect harmony. "I wanted us to stay forever," Ruby whispered as Sister Magdalene knelt beside her. "This is the first place that felt like home." Tears froze on her cheeks before they could fall. Morse dismounted outside the cabin, his patience finally exhausted. "Enough games, everyone out, now." Zeke stood in the doorway, blocking the sheriff's entrance. "This is still my property." "Not for much longer," Wellington called from his horse. But Ruby's flight had crystallized something in Zeke's mind. The child's desperate need for belonging. Sister Magdalene's quiet courage. The other children's fierce loyalty to each other. This was worth fighting for, even if the fight meant losing everything else. "I'm adopting them," Zeke announced. "All 10, legal and proper." The declaration stunned everyone into silence. "You can't," Margaret said. "A single man can't adopt 10 children. Then I won't be single." Zeke turned to Sister Magdalene. Her eyes widened with understanding. "Will you help me raise them?" he asked. "As their teacher? Their protector? Their family?" Sister Magdalene's hand moved to her habit, fingering the rough fabric that had defined her life for years. Her vows had been a refuge from pain, a way to serve God through service to others. But standing in this cabin surrounded by children who needed more than temporary salvation, she saw a different path. "I would need to be released from my religious obligations," she said carefully. "I'll help with that," Reverend Whitmore said. Unexpectedly, everyone turned to stare at the pale minister. His nervous demeanor had vanished, replaced by calm authority. "In fact," Whitmore continued, "I've been conducting an investigation into irregularities in child placement procedures. Sheriff Morse's methods have raised several questions." Morse's face went white. "What are you talking about?" "Work camps, Sheriff. Children disappearing from official custody. Payments made to individuals who were supposed to be providing care." The accusation hung in the air. Wellington shifted uncomfortably in his saddle. The townspeople exchanged uncertain glances. "You have no proof," Morse said, but his voice lacked conviction. Whitmore produced a leather portfolio from his coat. "Actually, I do. Records, testimonies, bank transactions." Wellington's horse pranced nervously as the truth emerged. The banker's involvement in the scheme was becoming clear. "This is ridiculous," Wellington blustered. "These are serious accusations without foundation." "With substantial foundation," Whitmore corrected. "Including documentation of your financial arrangements with certain institutions that exploit child labor." The web of corruption unraveled quickly. Morse had been selling children to work operations. Wellington had been financing the transactions. The scheme had operated for years under the guise of legitimate child welfare. Samuel lowered his knife as understanding dawned. The danger had always been real, but it was finally being exposed. Ruby emerged from her corner and walked to Zeke. She placed her small hand in his calloused palm. "Are we really staying?" she asked. "If you want to. Forever?" Zeke looked at Sister Magdalene, who nodded slowly. At Samuel, who managed his first genuine smile. At Thomas, already planning improvements to the ranch. At Maria, who spoke her feelings in a clear voice. "We want to stay," Maria said. "We want to be a family." Whitmore closed his portfolio with satisfaction. "Sheriff Morse, you're under arrest. Mr. Wellington, I suggest you reconsider those foreclosure proceedings." Morse made one last desperate grab for authority. "You can't prove anything. The children you sold will testify. The families you destroyed will speak. The evidence is overwhelming." Margaret watched the scene unfold with growing amazement. The man she had rejected for his isolation was now surrounded by love. The comfortable life she had chosen was revealed as built on others' suffering. "Ezekiel," she said quietly, "I misjudged you." "We all make choices," Zeke replied. "You made yours. I'm making mine." Snow began falling again, gentle flakes that softened the harsh edges of the confrontation. The children gathered around Zeke and Sister Magdalene, their faces bright with hope for the first time in months. Reverend Whitmore helped bind Morse's hands while explaining the legal proceedings that would follow. Wellington sat slumped in his saddle, his empire of exploitation crumbling around him. Ruby retrieved her drawings from the cabin walls, but she no longer needed them. The family in her pictures was standing right here in the snow, choosing each other despite every obstacle. "What happens now?" Thomas asked. Sister Magdalene looked at her habit, at the children, at Zeke's steady presence beside her. "Now we go home," she said. "And we build something that lasts." The words carried across the winter landscape, a promise spoken into the wind and sealed by the first family that none of them had expected but all of them desperately needed. The legal papers arrived 3 weeks later. Reverend Whitmore had worked with remarkable efficiency. Sheriff Morse sat in territorial prison awaiting trial. Wellington faced federal charges for his role in the child trafficking scheme. The foreclosure proceedings had vanished along with the banker's freedom. Sister Magdalene's release from her religious vows came through official channels, signed by church authorities who understood the greater good being served. She was no longer Sister Magdalene Washington. She was simply Maggie, teacher and guardian to 10 children who had finally found their place in the world. The adoption papers bore official seals and careful signatures. Ezekiel Thornfield was now legal father to Ruby, Samuel, Thomas, Maria, and 6 other souls who had been invisible to the world until love gave them substance. Spring arrived early that year. Snow melted in rushing streams that carved new paths down the mountainsides. The ground thawed with the patient persistence of seasons that acknowledge no authority but time itself. Grass emerged tentatively, then boldly, transforming the landscape from winter's harsh geometry into something softer. The children responded to the changing seasons with the resilience of youth. Ruby's drawings evolved from desperate wishes into architectural plans. The house needed expansion, and her artistic vision provided the blueprint. Samuel's suspicious nature transformed into protective vigilance, watching over his new siblings with the dedication of a seasoned guardian. Thomas became Zeke's right hand with the cattle, his gentle competence earning respect from both animals and adults. Maria's silence had given way to constant chatter, as if she were making up for all the words she had stored inside during the dark months. The other children found their own paths. Some showed aptitude for learning, others for crafts, still others for the endless tasks that kept a ranch functioning. Each discovered talents that had been buried under the weight of survival. Maggie, established a school in the expanded house, teaching not only the Thornfield children but also youngsters from neighboring ranches. Her classroom rang with voices reciting lessons, asking questions, sharing discoveries. The community that had once shunned her now sought her expertise. The ranch prospered under the care of many hands. Crops grew where none had grown before. Cattle multiplied under Thomas's watchful eye. Buildings rose from careful planning and shared labor. The property began to resemble Ruby's earliest drawings, though reality proved even more generous than imagination. Visitors came regularly now. Travelers seeking shelter found welcome. Families facing hardship discovered assistance. The Thornfield Ranch became known throughout the territory as a place where people could find help without judgment. Margaret visited once, accompanied by her new husband. She gazed at the bustling household with something approaching wonder. The man she had rejected for his isolation now commanded the respect of an entire community. "You've built something remarkable," she said to Zeke. "We all built it," he replied, watching the children play in the yard where his solitude had once echoed. Margaret nodded, understanding finally the difference between what she had wanted and what she had needed. She left with grace, carrying no bitterness for the path not taken. 6 months after the confrontation in the snow, the ranch held its first harvest celebration. Neighbors came from miles around, bringing food, music, and stories. The children, who had once hidden from strangers, now moved confidently among the guests, belonging fully to this place they had helped create. Ruby found Zeke during the evening festivities, when lanterns cast dancing shadows across the expanded house. She carried her latest drawing, more detailed than any before. The ranch spread across the paper in loving detail, every building, every fence, every tree rendered with the precision of intimate knowledge. But the most remarkable feature was the collection of figures scattered throughout the scene. Adults and children working together, playing together, living together in the harmony that had grown from the most unlikely beginning. At the bottom of the drawing, in Ruby's careful handwriting, were the words, "The Thornfield family." "Is this how you see us?" Zeke asked. Ruby nodded solemnly. "This is how we are." Maggie appeared beside them, her hair now free of the confining habit, her dress practical but feminine. She studied Ruby's artwork with the appreciation of someone who understood the power of dreams made manifest. "Still waiting for that bride?" she asked Zeke quietly. Zeke looked at the woman who had arrived with 10 starving children instead of the future he had planned, who had brought chaos and purpose, challenge and love, transformation and redemption to his empty house. "I think she finally arrived," he said. "Just took a different stagecoach than expected." Maggie smiled, her face bright in the lantern light. Around them, the celebration continued with the easy rhythm of people who had found their place in the world. Children laughed and played. Adults shared stories and dreams. The ranch house glowed with the warmth of belonging. The wind carried the sound of their joy across the dark plains, a testament to the power of unexpected love to transform the most barren landscape into something beautiful. What had begun with disappointment and desperation had become hope made visible. In the distance, stars appeared in the vast Montana sky, witnessing the completion of a family that had been assembled from the pieces of broken dreams. The lonely Cowboy had found his bride after all, along with the children who had made them both whole. The harvest moon rose over the Thornfield ranch, illuminating a scene that would have been impossible to imagine in the cold winter when everything began. But the best stories, the ones that matter most, are often the ones that arrive when we're waiting for something else entirely. Love had come to the ranch in the form of a nun and 10 orphans, proving that the most profound transformations often begin with the most unexpected visitors. The family they had built together would endure, rooted in the soil of shared hardship and watered by the patient cultivation of hope. The celebration continued into the night, marking not just the harvest of crops, but the harvest of hearts that, had finally found their home. And that is all to the story, for now. Please let me know where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will create a story there. Consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel. And if you enjoy our content, click this video on your screen. I promise you, it's worth watching. See you tomorrow.